At Home in North Branch by Arleta Richardson. Chapter 6. The First Term. A week or so later, I arrived at school early on Monday, hoping to finish the papers that had not been graded. To my surprise, Daniel was sitting on the steps. "Well, aren't you the early bird?" I said. "Did you leave home before daylight, or have you been here all night?" He smiled faintly.
"No, ma'am. I just got here. Is it all right if I come in and study or something?"
I regarded him with suspicion. Daniel was a good student, but his life was not exactly devoted to the pursuit of knowledge. Like most 10-year-olds, he was more inclined toward kickball, marbles, and furious running around the school ground. There was more here than met the eye. "By all means," I said. "I'll be putting lessons on the board."
Papa had to go to the county seat on business this morning, so I decided to ride this far with him,"
he volunteered as I unlocked the door. "That was convenient," I agreed. "Would you like to bring a bucket of water in before you start working?" Daniel glanced out the window at the empty playground, then nodded. I spread my papers on the desk and pondered his strange behavior. Was he looking for someone or trying to avoid someone? The hour went quickly, and it was soon time for the opening bell. I had forgotten that Daniel was in his seat, and as I went to open the door, I wondered again what might be going on. Hannah Sawyers stopped in front of me as the children filed in.
"Mrs. Williams, guess what Teddy has?" "Hannah, move on. You're holding up the line,"
Edward complained. We moved back out of the way, and I gave Hannah my attention. Recalling that Teddy had been in church yesterday, I answered, "Nothing that everyone else can get, I hope."
"Mumps," Hannah announced triumphantly. "He looks like this."
She puffed her cheeks out as far as they would go.
"Ma thought he looked funny, so she gave him a pickle. It was mumps, all right." "What does a pickle have to do with it?"
Nancy Lawton wanted to know.
"Do pickles give you mumps?"
"No," I laughed. "But if you have the mumps, anything sour will make your jaw cramp. You can be sure that the swelling isn't just a bad toothache."
"I don't want one either,"
Jamie Elliott declared.
"I don't like pain."
I didn't point out that since Jamie shared a desk with Teddy, there was a strong possibility that he would soon be sharing something else as well. It wouldn't be the first time a childhood disease had gone through the school. Everyone else was present, and we were soon engaged in the day's routine. The upper grades began work on a history test while I settled the younger ones with their assignments. Then I walked to the back of the room to observe the test takers. I was concerned about Daisy Brewer. Her reserved demeanor had not changed. She was still the prim little girl who had entered school this year. However, there had been several unusual occurrences the past few weeks that seemed to involve her. One evening, I couldn't find my math book with the answer key in it, and I assumed I had left it at school. It wasn't there in the morning, but later it appeared on my desk. From that time on, Daisy turned in perfect math papers each day, a feat accomplished only by Joel Gage in the past. "The evidence is only circumstantial," I said to Len when I related the incident at home. "But the coincidence does seem a bit much." A week later, we returned to the room after recess to find the contents of the desk scattered about the floor. The children voiced loud and indignant objections as they restored order for the next half an hour, all except Daisy. She replaced her belongings in silence. "I think she is sneaky," I said to Len. "She's too obedient and too nice, at least to my face. I tell myself I shouldn't be so suspicious, but I can't help it." "It shouldn't be hard to keep an unobtrusive eye on someone as young as that," Len replied. "Sooner or later she'll trap herself, if she is being underhanded." Dry leaves scurried about the school ground when we went outside for recess, and the wind was cold and damp. Toby Elliott cast a speculative look at the sky.
"Might have a snow tonight," he predicted. "The almanac says a long, cold winter. Do you think the almanac knows?" "I suspect they know about as well as anyone can," I answered. "They base their forecasts on what has occurred in the past. Things seem to run in cycles." The girls were occupied with keeping their skirts from flying up, and they soon retreated to the leeward side of the building.
Daniel had joined the other boys and was behaving in his usual boisterous way. Whatever had concerned him this morning was apparently forgotten. By the following week, there were 3 more cases of mumps, and we were down to 12 children. This was a good opportunity to work individually with them, and I took advantage of it. During a session with Julianne, I was given the current status of the Lawton family.
Pa says he's going to sell the farm because Mr. Brewer promised him a new house, she informed me. But Ma says he'd better not count his chickens before they hatch. She wants to see the new place before she leaves the old one.
This sounded sensible to me, but Julianne continued.
Pa says he knows what he's doing. He says Ma doesn't know all the facts, and so she shouldn't put her oar in.
It was hard to stop Julianne once she got started. I learned from her that it had been Cy's idea for Elizabeth to work at the mill, and Elizabeth hadn't wanted to do it. I managed to turn the conversation to our lesson before any more information should be forthcoming. I was sure that Julianne could repeat overheard arguments verbatim and wouldn't hesitate to do so if she had an audience. Meanwhile, my biggest worry was that the entire school might come down with the mumps.
Jamie Elliott's jaws swelled up right before my eyes,
I said to Sarah Jane.
I was about to ask him what he was eating when I realized he was flushed with fever. I imagine Toby will be next.
I wonder why it is that the children who cause the most trouble in school never get sick, Sarah Jane said. Hector Fenton hasn't missed a day since we started. Of course, I don't imagine his mother wants him around home either. She sighed. At least we have an understanding. He knows that his days are numbered if he doesn't toe the mark. It was the end of November, and the long Thanksgiving weekend was fast approaching. I was looking forward to a visit with Ma and a chance to play with Violet, who had just celebrated her 3rd birthday. All of the children were looking forward to the holiday, too.
We're having a goose for dinner, Rosanna announced. Ma's tired of being pecked by the old thing every time she goes out in the yard.
It was a good time to talk about the Pilgrims and the landing of the Mayflower. A history book gave the measurements of the little ship, and Joel suggested that we measure off the length and breadth on the playground and see how much room each person would have had.
We couldn't get the whole Mayflower out here,
Jay Stacy announced.
It was bigger than our schoolhouse.
Since none of the children had ever seen an ocean-going vessel, this was hard to imagine.
It must have been at least 6 times as large, Joel figured, because there were 103 people on it. That's about 6 times what we have in our school. We don't live here, Hannah reminded him. We'd need more space if we had to sleep in this room. As hard as life was for the Pilgrims, they still found a lot to thank God for, I said. We have so much we should be even more grateful. Let's see who can make the longest list of things that you are thankful for between now and dinner time.
Heads bent over slates and papers, and the sounds of writing mingled with the crackling of wood burning in the stove. My list would include my husband and friends, a church that I loved, a Christian home, and not least, the children who sat in front of me. Thomas and Sarah Jane moved into their new home before Christmas. Their land lay northwest of us and hadn't been cleared all the way to the river. Thomas had always been a city boy, and he was satisfied to keep it that way. A garden, a small orchard, and a few chickens were his only concession to country living.
I won't lose any sleep over not having a milk separator to wash, Sarah Jane said, but I would feel lost without a garden.
We had watched with interest as the sturdy 2-story house took shape. When the roof was on and the doors and windows were installed, Sarah Jane began planning where the furniture would be placed, what kind of rugs would cover the hardwood floors, and how soon she could begin to hang curtains. All their things that had been in storage arrived by train from Ann Arbor.
We have wedding gifts that we've never had room to use, she said happily. We'll spend a few days over Christmas with each of our parents. Then the rest of the time until school starts will be used to settle. It will be worth waiting 3 years for my own home to have it here in North Branch near you. Hasn't the Lord been good to us?
I agreed that he had. I loved my little home, my river, and the work that had led Len to stay in this community. One day, North Branch might be a large city, but now its status as a small village was just what I liked. The children had worked hard to prepare for the Christmas program. Jay and Joel brought in the tree that we chose from our woods, and everyone had a hand in making the bright decorations.
"This has been a good term,"
I said to Len as we closed the building after the program was over.
"If the rest of the year goes this smoothly, it will set a record of some kind."
End of chapter 6.